Okay.
All right, go ahead and share.
Okay. Do you see my code that I have up?
Yep.
This I think was for the count up when I did the countdown. The only thing that I changed was I printed in there, and then this was actually a return. Um, and then if I run that, it should count down to 0 from 10. And then I was trying to figure out the count up part, and I think what I'm doing is kind of cheesy, I guess, but I took the return out so it won't just return, and then I have it call the function and print after so that it'll be calling it kind of like on its way back up.
Mhm.
Um, but that does, I am getting a none at the end there. Um, so I know that like it's not completely 100% working.
Sure.
This was just some other code I was messing with. I think I was able to get it to work that way, but I don't know if that's the way that we're supposed to do it, adding an extra argument, because then the user will have to tell it where it wants the countdown to stop.
Right. Right. Let's start by taking a look at that first solution. What do you think you could change to prevent it from printing none?
Um, I guess like another one that would still like another way around it would be like if I did something like that, it would at least the none would disappear, I think. But yeah, then you'll still have this line down here. But I know that it's because it's missing a return.
Does anybody have any ideas?
Could you do return countdown plus print? And there might be an issue
All in the same time online.
getting
Um,
online if there's not a type issue. Yeah, there's a type issue. Um, int and non-type.
uh,
The reason I said that because I did mine similar. It was actually a similar problem that I've done before that I remembered. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Sure. We can jump into yours next, Tomiwa. So let's see if we can figure out why this is not supporting, or why it's not doing what we think it's supposed to do or what we want it to do. So we know we reach a case where n will equal 0 and it will return 0, which is an integer. In what case is it returning the none type?
I'm I'm not sure, to be honest, because to me it would make sense that when it gets to 0, we would return 0, and then everything else would have an integer.
You might have to tell it to stop when it reaches 0.
That's essentially what he's doing in line 2, though.
But you might still, because you could throw the recursive part into a while loop. So it's recursing there, or it could be the print. If you're printing, if there's nothing left to print, would it return a none type?
Because the reason I ended up using, because I wanted to just return the recursive call, but if you return, you're not going to be able to print after because it's going to return an exit. Um, And this is like, I guess the last part I was trying to figure out is how to get it to return, but still display the right information. Because if the print's before it, it'll do the countdown essentially again.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Or if you print the function, yeah, you end up in a. Yeah, you mind if I share my screen for a second? I can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hold on,
Hit,
before we.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. You want me to just bring it back up?
Yeah, let's just bring it back up real quick.
Okay.
So
Okay.
let me just say this. There comes a point where where n becomes 0. So we are essentially returning countdown, and we're passing in 1 minus 1, which equals 0. And in that same line, we are printing 1. We are trying to print an integer, but because we're printing, that should be a string. And then we're trying to add that string to the result of this function with 0 being passed in. So it would be 0 plus a string. That still doesn't solve the whole none type, though. So what is returning that none type?
I imagine it would be like if I got rid of the print, it's not gonna return anything, but I don't think it'll error because we'll return 0. So just in the sense that that's the only thing that changed, I imagine it has to be something within, or one of the cases within, for the print statement.
Do you think utilizing an F string can help in this scenario?
Possibly. Could we do like, I don't know if we can, I've never tried to put a function in an F string. It doesn't look like it likes that. Well, I could maybe make a variable. Well, I don't know if that will call it too. Still doesn't seem to like that. Oh, maybe. Ooh.
All right, we're
Getting closer.
definitely. I mean, if you replace that plus with a comma, I mean, you're essentially satisfying the requirements of the challenge, or that too.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if that works, I'm good with it.
Right on, right on. All right, Corey, you wanted to let's switch the Corey's real quick, and then tell me you could show us yours. Because I think Corey's was we were segueing onto yours because of something similar, right?
Well, I had a similar issue. Oh, good God. What's it doing here? Oh, there. There we go. I can get this thing to stop. Good God. There we go. I had the same issue with it, either returning a none type or it was getting stuck in an infinite loop. And so I took out the print. I had the print function. And I took that out and I put it in a while loop. So it's recursing within the while loop. I don't know if that is cheating or not. But it does return kind of, except that it doesn't return to 0. This is counting down, not counting up.
I mean, you could have it return 0 just by changing your print statement.
Yeah, you could just tell it to return 0.
And did you say you were able to get its count up?
No, I hadn't gotten it to count up yet.
Okay.
But I thought we were talking about counting down just then, but
Now that I'm thinking about it, Philip, if we go back to yours, I think it was returning that none type because you were returning, when it was returning that none type, we were returning, that was when we were returning the function call, the recursive function plus print statement, right? And
Yeah, I
I
think you can. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go on. You could go ahead.
I think he could put a print underneath the function call in the inside the recursive, and then just hit return after that with nothing returned, and then just don't print the call on line 10 and just call the function. I don't know why that works, but it does. Yeah, and then underneath line 6, yeah, or there you go. And then get rid of the print statement on line 11. And then just call the function just plain Jane. Not really sure why that works, but it does.
You're muted, Philip. I don't know if you're talking.
Is it just because since we're printing inside of the function,
Yeah, because it's like when you
then you're
print a function call, like it's trying to show you what returns. So that's why, like, if we put the print back, it'll still return none, but like the function is still executing a print statement on each call. So that's like why the numbers will still appear. But I did think of another thing for handling it is like, I think I put it in the Zoom chat, but like, could we also like just start, like make a start is equal to 0 or something like that, and then have the function call increment that variable, and then change our base case to if n is equal to n, and then you probably wouldn't use n in the recursive call. You'd have to use like start or like whatever variable you assign to 0.
Only one way to find out. You want to try typing that out while we review what Tomiwa's?
Yeah, I'll work on that, and then see if I can get it to work.
Cool.
So this was so to include 0, initially I had if num equals 0, and I just started at 1. So to include 0, I changed the base case, and then created an empty string with result, and then just added all to result. And I had to typecast the integer because right here I can't add an integer to a string.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to typecast it, and then yeah. And the one part that I mentioned earlier that kind of was still foggy to me was, so let's say I take that out and I put result plus this, it prints it or returns it the opposite way. And I know it has something to do with the call stack, but I don't know, I just cannot wrap my head around what is going on there. Like, so it's like it's returning the result first.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's descending, but then if it's returning a function first, it ascends. Yeah. But it works.
Anyone have any ideas off the bat?
So every time you call the function, you're updating the variable num, right? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
And so if he puts result before, then that variable is updated after. Right. So then it counts up if you put it on the opposite side, and then down if you leave it where it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Did that make sense what I said? Sometimes my explanations don't.
No, like it makes sense what you're saying, and I see, like I can remember, like, hey, I put it here, this happens, and or I put it in here and this happens, but like it's like why? And I know what goes on the call stack, and I mean I'm just gonna watch that video that I think Chris sent in the chat. I started reading it a little bit, so I'm just gonna have to just continue to go through it. But yeah,
Right on. I think Tyler, were you going to say something?
every time you go through it, even if you're adding like string to result beforehand, each time you recursively loop through it, are you just replacing whatever you just added in with the string?
say it again.
So like when so you know how like results an empty string? Do you want it to go back to an empty string every time? I guess I haven't really even looked at your code enough.
No, so the empty string is being filled right here. So like even I think even in the first case, let's say it starts num is 5, and then it passes this if statement, goes to this, and then result would equal 5, and then it goes to the recursive case, and then 4. So the string is only going to be empty like the first time, but nothing. It's not returning an empty string in any case, because by the time it returns the result, the string already has a number in it.
Let's call that function on line 9. Let's update the parameter, the value that we're passing in. Let's start with 1. Let's just pass in 1 and let's run it. Now let's flip the result and the begin at 0.
You said oh, that's it, and just do it again.
Yeah. So what do you think changed? What is the element that changed that is causing these numbers in the string to be added in reverse?
So okay, so in this case, 0 was added. Hold on. So it's the yeah, I don't know, because I know like it calls what's at the top of the stack first, right? So I'm guessing like 0 was added to the stack first, and then 1, and then once you're returning it, it's kind of just calling that first, and then calling the function again. But then it's like if it's flipped, if the stack is essentially the same, as in 0 goes there first and then 1 goes there first, but I guess if you call the function first, it brings 0 before the 1.
Right. If you call the function first, you're changing the value of result before it's printed. Whereas if you're calling result first, you're printing that value before result changes. So right now you're passing in 1, and because result is being printed before the recursive call, it prints 1 first, and then it executes 1 minus 1. Otherwise, it would execute 1 minus 1 first, and then print your original value, the parameter that you passed in.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense to me.
But I like this. I like that you're with this solution, you're essentially able to do both halves of the challenge simply by flipping two variables or two parts of one line, essentially. I would say it's pretty elegant. I like that. Good job.
It wasn't entirely my solution. Like, like I said, I did this. This is a problem I've come across before, and I'm pretty sure I've like gotten help. So, but yeah.
Right on. Let's see. Does anybody else want to share theirs before we return to Philip?
I did kind of get something working, but it's still like not quite how I want it. But
Let's give you a few
I
minutes.
used
Then.
okay.
How about that? And let's see. I'm going to pick on someone then. Harry, what about you? I know you were saying early on that you were having difficulty wrapping your head around recursions. How did you do on this challenge?
Not doing very well. I'm trying to understand what's going on. I think I need to go back a few steps.
Are you comfortable sharing what you have so far with the class? And
Now I have nothing, to be honest. I'm just trying to follow along because I don't want to start doing something that I don't understand what I'm doing.
right on, that's fair. That's fair. Let's see. Anybody else? Joyce, how about you?
Sure.
Right on.
I see it.
Yep.
Yeah, so ignore this. This is just I was following what Tomiwa was doing. So this is my solution. And it's very similar to, I think, Phil's. So this one is the counting down, and it actually took me longer to figure out how to count up.
Mhm. Right on. Walk us through it step by step, line by line.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the base case. If number equals to 0, it'll print 0. Else, I'll print the number and then basically call back to the function, but it's just with number -1. And
Mhm.
since I'm doing the print before the calling back, that's why it's printing. Oops. Sorry. That's why it's printing from 5 down to 0. And then for the counting up, I think this count as the base case.
Mhm.
And basically, because I'm going through the calling back first and then print them out. So that's why it's like it has all the numbers and then it start calling back. So it start counting from 0 until 5. I think that makes sense to me. That sound right?
It's working, so it is right. Very interesting base case though. Because the code works, but essentially what the base case should be is one single case. In every case, however, the number would be greater than 0. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this reflects essentially every case.
Mm. So should I add like what I have up there?
Let's see. Let's hear some thoughts. What would the base case in this scenario be? What would the simplest case be?
Yeah, I couldn't figure out the base case because base case should be what is
It should still be either like if it's less than 0 equal to 0, right? And then like return 0 or num.
I was thinking like if num is equal to num, basically, since we're gonna be like starting from the bottom, but
but
we
if
want
num
like when we get to the last number, right? But I had trouble figuring out how to write it myself. I got my other solution to work, but it does have a simple base case, but I had to like assign a variable, and then like if that variable is equal to num.
Okay. Now in Joyce's, before we jump to yours, Philip, in Joyce's scenario, her challenge, we were still not quite sure how we articulate or define the base case. And the thing about number equaling number is that still applies to every case.
I think it's just equal to 0. Because the recursion is still counting down. But then outside of the recursion, it's counting up somehow. With my code, I kind of have print statements on each side of when the function is calling.
Mhm.
And then it counts down first and then it counts up afterwards. It doesn't simultaneously do it. So I'm thinking that the base case is for the actual how many times you want the recursion to call itself, not necessarily what the product of that would be.
Okay, that makes sense.
if I add this base case, it print out 2 zeros.
I think you should try return instead of print. That might help.
Oh, that you're right, maybe. Oh.
And if you want 0, I think you should do if num is less than or equal to 0, or just less than a 0.
Okay. Why is it doing that?
What's going to freeze?
No, it's just not printing the 0.
Try less than 0.
Just less than 0.
Mm.
Now here we go. Yeah. So why is it if num equals to 0, returns 0 ditto?
When num equals 0, it was returning 0 twice.
Oh yes, but why is it like this doesn't work if it's like 0 just didn't show up?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sorry about the noise. I think I can see why. So if you have it equaling to 0, you need to return print 0. Because if you're just returning 0, that 0 is never getting printed. The only numbers that are getting printed is every number that goes through, and then at the very end, all the returns will trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll say it's 10.
Oh.
The first one that gets ready is 10, and then 9, and then 8. So it's almost like a staging area, the way the return is set up at the very end. So if you have a number equal to 0, you need to print out 0. But if you have number less than 0, it's also working, because when it goes less than 0, 0 is still getting added to that final return. Right?
Gotcha. That I think that yeah, that makes sense.
Like you were probably pretty much solving the problem for -1 as your base case rather than 0. But you weren't returning that 0 out of anything. That's why it was still, yeah.
Well,
I think.
makes
I don't know.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right on. Awesome work, everyone. Awesome work so far.
Thank you guys. All right.
Philip, do you have it ready?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Looks like I successfully unmuted myself this time. The one thing I changed is I added a default parameter for start, and then I did have to do something similar where, like, instead of just going till the number is equal to the start, I had to go 1 over, I think, for the same reason. Because like when it reaches 10, it won't actually, here, let me pull this up a little bit. Oops, I just like double ran. But it is working, right? So like each recursive call will take in, but then it also will add whatever start is plus 1. And then eventually we'll have our start equal to the number that was put in plus 1. But we won't actually return 11.
Instead, it looks like it returned an empty line. Was that what happened if we scroll down?
Ooh, yeah, I did not catch that. I'm wondering where the empty line is coming from. But actually, that might have just been me double hitting it, because so I ran it twice, and it looks like it just goes from 0 to 10. Let me just run it again. Yeah. I think I just slammed the enter button a little bit too much.
Yeah, that's really interesting that it did that, but awesome. So it really looks like y'all are grasping recursion pretty well. Let's do this. How many of you would say you're feeling confident with? Let's do a little vote here. If you're feeling confident with recursion, type A in the chat. And if you're not feeling so confident, type B in the chat. Okay. A fairly good number of A's. So for the next challenge, I want you all to pair up. But I want A's to pair up with B's as much as they can. So if you're not feeling so comfortable, let's have you pair up with somebody who is, and vice versa. How does that sound? Right on. So let's go ahead. Feel free to take a break, and we could get started again at about 7:30. You could jump right into the next challenge. Again, there's going to be 4 of them, and I will open up some breakout rooms, and y'all can do your best to pair up accordingly. And then we will reconvene at 9 o'clock to review, unless you all finish earlier. Once you're done, just hop out of the breakout room, and once essentially everybody is back in the main room, then we could just get started. Sound good? Cool.
We're doing every challenge?
Try to do as many as you can out of the 4. Oh, one last thing. Don't feel like you have to start at the very first one. Just start at any which one you feel most comfortable with. That way we have like a variety of different challenge solutions to review at the end. So try to get through all of them, but you don't have to do them in order.